Picture this. It's the 9th year after the Hijrah, the Prophet's historic migration. A journey is about to be undertaken that will push faith, loyalty, and human endurance to their absolute limits. This wasn't just another military campaign. It was a defining moment, a true trial by fire and sand, known forever as the Hour of Distress. Our story starts in the middle of a brutal Arabian summer, with a heat that was just relentless. The destination was a long, long way off. The enemy was said to be a superpower, and resources, well, they were dangerously low. This expedition was going to test the early Muslim community like never before. So, how did this journey become such a profound test of faith? Well, here's how we're going to break it down. We'll look at why it was called the Hour of Distress, check out the incredible sacrifices that were made, uncover the internal challenges that came to light, and see the ultimate spiritual reward that came from pushing through it all. Okay, let's start with the name itself. Why such a heavy title? The name tells you everything you need to know about the conditions these believers were marching straight into. The expedition was officially called Jaysh el-Usra, which literally means the Army of Distress. And believe me, it earned that name. The sources are all in agreement. This wasn't just a tough trip. It was a perfect storm of brutal heat, a ridiculously far destination, and a critical lack of supplies and even animals to ride. And let's really put this into perspective. We're talking about a journey of almost 800 miles, mostly on foot, through the desert during the hottest time of the year. This wasn't a short sprint. It was a grueling, months-long marathon that would push the human body to its breaking point. So what could possibly trigger such a dangerous journey? Well, word started coming in from travelers that the Byzantine Roman Empire, the superpower of the day, was gathering a huge army on the northern border. They were apparently rallying allied Arab tribes, getting ready to attack. So the Prophet decided that a preemptive move was the only way to protect the community. And right here, we see the divine context for this decision. This verse wasn't just a call to arms. It was a command to stand firm, to be resolute against a clear and present danger. And it was a powerful reminder that their real strength wasn't in their numbers, but in their piety and their trust in God. So, with a major threat on the horizon and a divine command revealed, the community faced a massive problem. How do you equip an army for a mission like this? And this, right here, is where we see the true meaning of sacrifice come roaring to life. This was the big question. You can't just send thousands of men on an 800-mile march without food, water, weapons, or camels. So the Prophet made an open call for donations, turning to the entire community to fund this army of distress. And the response was absolutely breathtaking. Uthman ibn Affan famously equipped 300 camels and dropped 1,000 gold dinars, an absolute fortune. The Prophet was so moved, he said, whatever Uthman does after this moment will not be held against him. Imagine that. Abdurrahman ibn Auf gave a massive amount of silver. But 2 other contributions, well, they became legendary. This slide just captures that incredible moment. Umar, always in a friendly competition of good deeds with his best friend Abu Bakr, brought half of everything he owned. He was sure he'd finally outdone him. When the Prophet asked what he left for his family, he said, the same amount. But then, Abu Bakr showed up. When the Prophet asked him the same question, his answer was simple. I left for them Allah and His Messenger. He brought it all, every last bit. But maybe the most powerful sacrifice didn't come from those with wealth, but from those with nothing. Men who were desperate to join the army came to the Prophet, begging for a camel to ride, but there just weren't any left. And they walked away not relieved, but with tears streaming down their faces, absolutely heartbroken that their poverty kept them from serving. Their sincerity was so pure, it was honored forever in the Quran. But this expedition wasn't just about facing an enemy out there. It also earned another nickname, Al-Fadhiha, which means the unmasking. And it was called that because it exposed a serious threat that was growing right there inside the community. So while the believers were giving everything they had and weeping because they couldn't give more, the hypocrites were just sitting back, spreading poison. They mocked the huge donations from the wealthy, calling it showing off. And they ridiculed the tiny contributions of the poor, saying God didn't need their little handful of dates. Their main tactic was to harp on the very real dangers of the journey. They tried to plant seeds of doubt and fear, telling everyone, don't go out in this heat, it's crazy, it's too hard. They were using physical comfort as an excuse to get people to abandon a spiritual duty, trying to weaken the army before it even left. But then, this powerful rebuttal came down in the Quran, and it just put everything into perspective. The verse acknowledges the blistering heat, sure, but then reminds them of a fire that is infinitely hotter, framing this temporary physical struggle against the backdrop of eternal consequences. So now, let's head out onto the trail with the army, where all those warnings about hardship became a terrifying reality. This is where we see the believers pushed right to the edge of survival, and in that very moment, opening the door for divine mercy. The accounts from this journey describe something almost unimaginable. The army completely ran out of water. The thirst was so extreme, so life-threatening, that the men were forced to slaughter their own precious camels, their only way to carry supplies, just to drink the water stored inside the animal stomachs. This was the absolute peak of distress. And yet, it was right then, at that exact moment, described in the Quran as the time of distress, when some hearts had nearly given up, that a verse of forgiveness came down. It was a confirmation of the faith of the Prophet and all those who stuck with him through this unbelievable trial, reassuring them that their struggle was seen and it was accepted. And this brings us to one of the most beautiful lessons from this whole experience. When they finally returned, the Prophet turned to his exhausted companions and taught them something incredible about the power of your intention. He told them that the believers who were left behind in Medina for legitimate reasons, like being sick or too poor, had actually shared in the reward of every single step the army took. And that leaves us with a pretty powerful thought to reflect on, doesn't it? The expedition of Tabook teaches us that the greatest journeys aren't always measured in miles traveled, but in the sincerity you hold in your heart. True participation, true sacrifice, and true reward, in the end, they all come down to our deepest intentions.